Most men spend years trying to become more attractive without realizing that the quality women notice most is often the one they are doing everything to hide. They think attraction comes from appearance. They think it comes from confidence, money, status, charm, the perfect conversation, or knowing exactly what to say at the right moment. But there is something far more subtle that creates attraction, something most men completely overlook. And strangely enough, the harder a man tries to display it, the less powerful it becomes. It is the ability to be completely comfortable without needing to be chosen. This is one of the biggest psychological differences between a man who desperately wants attention and a man who naturally receives it. Most men never notice when their desire for approval begins controlling their behavior. At first, it seems harmless. A woman shows interest and he feels confident. She responds quickly and his mood improves. She becomes distant and suddenly he starts wondering what went wrong. He checks his phone. He rereads messages. He starts analyzing every word. He wonders if he should text again. He wonders if he said too much. He wonders if she is losing interest. And without realizing it, something important has changed. He is no longer interacting with her because he genuinely wants to. He is interacting with her because he needs a particular response from her. That difference is almost impossible to hide because neediness rarely announces itself with words. It appears through behavior. It appears in how quickly a man abandons his priorities. It appears in how much attention he gives before trust has been established. It appears in how desperately he tries to keep a conversation alive. It appears in how uncomfortable he becomes when someone pulls away. And most importantly, it appears in the emotional weight he places on another person's reaction. This is where attraction begins to change, because attraction needs freedom. It needs curiosity. It needs space for two people to discover each other. But when a man is constantly trying to secure someone's attention, he removes that freedom. Everything becomes predictable. She knows he will respond. She knows he will chase. She knows he will forgive. She knows he will always be there. And when something becomes completely predictable, the mind often stops paying close attention to it. This is not about playing games. It is not about intentionally disappearing. It is not about pretending to be busy. It is not about ignoring someone to create jealousy. Those are strategies, and strategies eventually reveal themselves. The deeper principle is completely different. A man becomes attractive when his life remains meaningful even when nobody is watching. That is the quality most men ignore. He has something that demands his attention, something he is building, something he is learning, something he is pursuing, something that exists independently of whether a woman approves of him. And that changes everything, because now his attention becomes a choice, not a currency he desperately gives away in exchange for validation. Think about the difference. One man wakes up wondering who is going to give him attention today. Another wakes up wondering what he is going to accomplish today. One is monitoring reactions. The other is building a life. One is trying to be impressive. The other is becoming impressive through what he does when nobody is looking. And people can feel that difference. You cannot manufacture it with a confident voice. You cannot fake it with expensive clothes. You cannot create it by memorizing psychological tricks. Because genuine purpose changes the way a person moves through the world. A man with purpose does not need to constantly prove that he has value. His life gives him evidence. His discipline gives him evidence. His progress gives him evidence. His ability to keep promises to himself gives him evidence. And because he has developed that internal foundation, he becomes less dependent on external approval. This is where something fascinating happens. The less he needs to be validated, the more naturally confident he becomes. He stops trying to impress. He stops forcing conversations. He stops desperately looking for signs that someone likes him. He stops treating every interaction like a test he must pass. Instead, he becomes curious. He listens, he observes, he enjoys the interaction without desperately needing a particular outcome. And that creates something most men spend years trying to manufacture: mystery. Not because he is hiding information, but because his entire emotional world is not immediately available for someone else to control. A woman cannot completely predict what will make him happy. She cannot determine his confidence with one message. She cannot destroy his entire day by becoming distant, and that independence creates curiosity because people naturally become more interested in what they cannot completely define. Most men make the mistake of revealing too much too quickly, not just information, emotion. They reveal how much they care before the connection has earned that level of investment. They reveal how afraid they are of losing the person. They reveal how badly they want approval. They reveal their expectations. They reveal their insecurity. And then they wonder why the interaction suddenly feels heavy. The problem is not that emotion is weak. The problem is that uncontrolled emotion creates pressure. A man can care deeply without becoming dependent. He can be affectionate without becoming desperate. He can show interest without abandoning himself. That distinction is critical because emotional control does not mean having no emotions. It means your emotions do not control your decisions. You can feel attraction without immediately acting on every impulse. You can miss someone without chasing them. You can want someone without believing you need them. You can enjoy attention without depending on it. That is strength. And this is where many men misunderstand what women actually find attractive. They think women want a man who never cares, a man who is cold, a man who ignores messages, a man who acts emotionally unavailable. But emotional absence is not the same as emotional independence. Coldness creates distance. Independence creates freedom. A cold man avoids connection because he is afraid of vulnerability. A secure man can connect deeply without losing himself. That is a completely different psychological state. The strongest man is not the one who feels nothing. He is the one who can feel deeply without becoming controlled by what he feels. And that ability becomes especially powerful when uncertainty appears. Because uncertainty is where most men reveal themselves. When everything is going well, almost anyone can appear confident. But what happens when she takes longer to respond? What happens when she becomes less available? What happens when she disagrees with you? What happens when you do not know whether she is interested? This is where the difference becomes visible. The insecure man immediately tries to restore certainty. He sends another message. He asks what happened. He tries harder. He becomes more available. He seeks reassurance. He wants an answer immediately because uncertainty makes him uncomfortable. But the emotionally independent man responds differently. He notices the uncertainty. He accepts it. He continues living his life. He does not create a story in his head. He does not turn a delayed response into a personal rejection. He understands that he cannot control another person's emotions, and because he accepts that reality, he does not need to force an outcome. That is powerful because the moment you stop trying to control another person's reaction, you regain control over your own behavior. You become calmer, you become more observant, you become less reactive, and people notice calmness, especially when everyone else is desperate for certainty. There is something naturally compelling about someone who does not collapse when circumstances change. A man who remains himself, whether he is receiving attention or not, communicates something powerful. His identity is not for sale. His confidence is not rented from other people. His self-worth is not determined by who chooses him. And that leads to another quality most men underestimate: boundaries. A man who does not need approval becomes capable of saying no. He becomes capable of leaving conversations that consistently disrespect him. He becomes capable of rejecting situations that violate his values. He becomes capable of telling someone what he wants without being terrified that honesty will make them leave. This does not make him arrogant. It makes him clear, and clarity is attractive because it removes confusion. Many men believe being agreeable will make women like them more, so they agree with everything. They tolerate everything, they change their opinions, they hide their preferences, they become whoever they think the other person wants them to be. At first, they think they are being nice, but eventually they become invisible because there is nothing distinctive about someone who constantly adapts himself to receive approval. A man with standards is different. He knows what he likes, he knows what he values, he knows what he will accept, and he knows what he will not accept. He does not need to announce these things constantly. His behavior communicates them. This is why boundaries are not about controlling another person, they're about controlling your own participation. You cannot force someone to respect you, but you can decide what you will do when they do not. You cannot force someone to value your time, but you can decide who receives access to it. You cannot force someone to choose you, but you can decide whether you will continue chasing someone who repeatedly chooses not to. That is where self-respect becomes visible. And self-respect is one of the most overlooked forms of attraction, because when a man truly respects himself, he behaves differently. He does not beg. He does not threaten. He does not manipulate. He does not create drama to prove his importance. He simply knows that losing someone's attention is not the same thing as losing his value. That realization creates freedom, and freedom changes the energy of every interaction. Now imagine two men. The first man desperately wants the woman to like him. Every interaction is an evaluation. Did she smile? Did she reply? Did she seem interested? Did she laugh enough? Did she respond quickly? He is constantly monitoring the outcome. The second man enjoys talking to her. He finds her attractive. He is interested. But he is also interested in his own life. He has things to do, people to see, skills to develop, goals to pursue. He does not need the interaction to prove anything about himself. And because he is not desperately trying to control the outcome, he can actually enjoy the moment. That is the irony. The man who wants attraction the most can become the least attractive because his desire for the outcome destroys the qualities that would have created it naturally. He becomes tense. He becomes predictable. He becomes reactive. He becomes focused on getting rather than experiencing. While the man who is comfortable with either outcome becomes more relaxed, more authentic, more curious, more present, and presence is rare. Most people are not actually present during conversations. They are thinking about how they are being perceived. They are preparing their next response. They are wondering whether they are making the right impression. They are trying to appear confident. But a man who is comfortable with himself does not have to constantly perform. He can listen. He can pause. He can disagree. He can laugh at himself. He can say what he actually thinks. He does not need every interaction to confirm his worth. And that creates authenticity. Authenticity cannot be manufactured for long. Eventually, people discover whether your confidence is real. They discover whether your boundaries are real. They discover whether your life actually has direction. They discover whether your independence exists only when someone is interested in you, or whether it remains intact when someone walks away. That is the real test. Because anyone can act confident when they are being admired. The deeper question is who you become when the attention disappears. Who are you when nobody is texting you? Who are you when nobody is praising you? Who are you when the person you wanted chooses someone else? Who are you when the opportunity disappears? Who are you when you are completely alone with your own thoughts? This is where a man's foundation is revealed, and if his entire identity depends on being desired, rejection will destroy him. But if his identity is built around purpose, values, discipline, and self-respect, rejection becomes information rather than a verdict. He can experience disappointment without becoming desperate. He can experience loss without losing himself. He can experience attraction without becoming controlled by it. That is emotional independence. And it is far more powerful than pretending not to care, because pretending not to care still means you care about appearing like you do not care. Real independence requires no performance. You simply understand that another person cannot complete an identity you have already built. And this is where most men get everything backward. They think they must become more valuable so someone will choose them. But the deeper transformation happens when you stop building yourself for the purpose of being chosen. You build yourself because your life deserves to be developed. You become disciplined because you respect your future. You develop skills because you want capability. You pursue purpose because you want meaning. You maintain standards because you respect yourself. And ironically, when you stop making attraction the goal, you often become more attractive because your behavior is no longer desperate. You are no longer asking, how can I make her want me? You are asking a much more powerful question. Do we actually fit each other? That single change transforms the entire dynamic. You stop auditioning, you start evaluating, you stop performing, you start connecting, you stop chasing approval. You start paying attention to compatibility, And that creates a completely different kind of confidence. The confidence of a man who knows that not everyone has to choose him because he understands something most men never learn. Being rejected does not make you less valuable. Being ignored does not make you less valuable. Being left does not make you less valuable. Someone else's inability to recognize your value does not erase it. And once you understand that, you become much harder to manipulate because manipulation depends on controlling what you fear losing. If you are terrified of losing someone's attention, they can control your behavior with attention. If you are terrified of rejection, they can control you with the threat of rejection. If you are terrified of being alone, you can be convinced to tolerate almost anything. But when you become comfortable with the possibility of losing what does not align with your values, fear loses its power. And that is when a man becomes genuinely free. He can love without possessing. He can desire without begging. He can commit without becoming dependent. He can walk away without hatred. He can stay without fear. That balance is rare, and because it is rare, it is powerful. Most men think the secret to attraction is becoming impossible to lose. But the deeper secret is becoming impossible to control through the fear of loss. That is the difference. One man is trying to make himself valuable enough that nobody leaves. The other understands that some people will leave regardless of how valuable he becomes, and he is okay with that because his life does not end when someone walks away. His purpose remains, his standards remain, his identity remains, his future remains. And when a man understands this, he no longer approaches women from a position of scarcity. He approaches them from abundance, not the fake kind, not the idea that he has endless options. Real abundance, the knowledge that his life contains meaning beyond one relationship, beyond one person's approval, beyond one person's attraction, beyond one person's decision. That is the quality most men ignore. And it may be one of the most powerful qualities a man can develop because when you are comfortable being alone, you can choose companionship without desperation. When you can walk away, you can stay because you genuinely want to. When you do not need approval, you can be honest. When you do not fear rejection, you can take risks. When you stop trying to impress everyone, you become more authentic. And when you become authentic, the people who genuinely appreciate you can finally see who you actually are. The irony is that the moment a man stops asking, how do I make her attracted to me? He starts becoming the kind of man who naturally creates attraction. Not because he discovered some secret manipulation technique, not because he learned how to play psychological games, but because he developed something much deeper, a life, a purpose, standards, emotional control, self-respect, and the freedom to choose rather than desperately seek to be chosen. This is what 99% of men fail to understand. They spend years chasing attention while ignoring the foundation that makes attention meaningful. They try to become more desirable without becoming more independent. They try to appear confident without developing self-respect. They try to create mystery without having a life of their own. They try to control attraction instead of becoming the kind of person who does not need to control it. But attraction becomes much more natural when you stop treating it like something you must obtain. The strongest man is not the man who can make every woman want him. He is the man who does not need every woman to want him. He knows who he is. He knows where he is going. He knows what he values. He knows what he will accept. And most importantly, he knows that his worth does not disappear when someone walks away. That is real confidence. And once a man develops that confidence, he no longer needs to chase attention. He becomes someone whose attention has value. He no longer needs to convince people to respect him. His standards communicate it. He no longer needs to prove that he is strong. His emotional control demonstrates it. He no longer needs to pretend that he does not care. He simply cares without losing himself. And that is the paradox. The less you need to be wanted, the more naturally desirable you become. The less you need approval, the more authentic you become. The less you fear rejection, the more confidently you live. The less you chase attention, the more valuable your attention becomes. And the less you fear losing someone, the more freedom you gain to build the life you actually want. So stop asking yourself how to become more attractive. Start asking yourself whether you have built a life you would still respect if nobody were watching, because that is where everything changes. When your confidence comes from your own actions, when your happiness is not dependent on someone else's attention, when your purpose continues whether someone stays or leaves, when your standards remain intact even when compromise would be easier, when you can walk away without needing revenge, when you can stay without needing control, when you can love without losing yourself, that is when you stop performing confidence and start possessing it. And that is what most men ignore. Not another trick, not another message, not another strategy, but the ability to be completely yourself without needing someone else to confirm that you are enough. Because the moment you become enough for yourself, you stop chasing people to prove your value. And ironically, that is often the moment other people begin to see your value more clearly. There is another side to attraction that most men never understand. They focus so much on getting attention that they completely overlook what happens after they receive it, because getting someone's attention is easy compared to keeping your own identity while receiving it. A woman can show a man tremendous interest, and within weeks, he can become a completely different person. He starts prioritizing her over everything. He changes his schedule. He becomes constantly available. He starts measuring his day by how much attention she gives him, and what began as attraction slowly becomes dependency. This is where many men unknowingly destroy the very attraction they worked so hard to create, because attraction does not grow simply because someone likes you. It grows when two people continue discovering something interesting about each other, and discovery requires movement. It requires individuality. It requires two separate lives coming together rather than one life consuming the other. The moment a man makes a woman the center of his entire emotional world, something changes. He stops bringing a complete life into the relationship. Instead, he starts expecting the relationship to become his life. That creates pressure, and pressure changes behavior. He becomes more sensitive, more reactive, more concerned with keeping things perfect. He begins avoiding disagreement. He hides opinions that might create conflict. He agrees when he actually disagrees. He says yes when he wants to say no. He starts becoming whatever he believes will keep her interested. But there is a problem with constantly adapting yourself for someone else. Eventually, they are no longer attracted to you. They are interacting with a version of you that was created to gain their approval. And the more you perform, the further you move from authenticity. This is why one of the most attractive things a man can possess is not confidence, it is congruence. When what you think, what you say, and what you do are aligned, people feel it. You are not constantly adjusting yourself based on the reaction in front of you. You are not changing your personality every time someone disagrees. You are not becoming louder when you feel insecure. You are not becoming quieter because you are afraid of rejection. You remain consistent, and consistency creates psychological safety. People know where they stand with you. They know what you believe. They know what you value. They know what you will tolerate. And they know that your behavior is not controlled by their mood. That is rare. Most people are emotionally reactive. If someone praises them, they become confident. If someone criticizes them, they collapse. If someone gives them attention, they feel valuable. If someone withdraws attention, they question themselves. Their emotional state is constantly being controlled from the outside. But a man who develops internal stability becomes difficult to shake, not because he is emotionless, because he has learned that emotions are information, not instructions. He can feel jealousy without acting irrationally. He can feel insecurity without allowing it to dictate his behavior. He can feel attraction without becoming obsessed. He can feel disappointment without becoming bitter. That level of control changes the way people experience him, because emotional stability creates presence. And presence is one of those qualities that cannot be explained through a simple technique. You notice it, you feel it, you recognize when someone is completely comfortable occupying their own space. They do not rush to fill silence. They do not constantly seek reassurance. They do not need everyone to agree with them. They are not afraid of pauses. They are not afraid of disagreement. They are not afraid that one awkward moment will destroy everything. And this creates another powerful psychological effect. They become difficult to manipulate through emotional pressure. If someone becomes distant, they do not immediately panic. If someone tries to create jealousy, they do not automatically compete. If someone becomes disrespectful, they do not desperately try to win them back. They observe, they decide, and then they act according to their standards. That is the difference between reaction and choice. Most men react. Powerful men choose. And the difference is often only a few seconds of emotional control. A reaction says, I need to fix this immediately. A choice says, let me understand what is actually happening. A reaction says, how do I make her interested again? A choice says, is this behavior something I actually want in my life? A reaction says, what can I do so she doesn't leave? A choice says, is this relationship healthy enough for me to stay? That shift completely changes the psychological dynamic because now you are no longer trying to convince someone to value you. You are evaluating whether the connection deserves your investment, and that is a much stronger position. But there is something even deeper. A man who values himself does not constantly announce his value. He does not tell people how confident he is. He does not need to explain why he deserves respect. He demonstrates it through his decisions. If something violates his values, he addresses it. If someone repeatedly disrespects him, he creates distance. If a situation no longer aligns with his goals, he leaves. Not dramatically, not emotionally. Simply, this is why quiet standards are often more powerful than loud confidence. Anyone can say, I will never tolerate disrespect. The real question is what you do when tolerating disrespect would allow you to keep someone you desperately want. That is the moment your standards become real, because standards that disappear when you become emotionally attached are not standards. They are preferences. And people can sense the difference. This is also why attraction becomes stronger when a man has the courage to disappoint someone. Most men are terrified of disappointing women they like. They want to be agreeable. They want to be easy to deal with. They want to avoid conflict. But a man who can respectfully say no communicates something powerful. He communicates that his approval of himself matters too. He does not need everyone to be happy with him. He does not need every interaction to end positively. He understands that being liked and being respected are not always the same thing. Sometimes the desire to be liked makes a man betray his own values. And every time he does that, his confidence quietly decreases. Because somewhere inside, he knows he abandoned himself to keep someone else comfortable. That is why self-respect is built through action, not affirmations, not motivational quotes, not pretending to be confident. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you build it. Every time you enforce a boundary, you build it. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you build it. Every time you walk away from something that repeatedly violates your values, you build it. And eventually something changes. You no longer need to convince yourself that you are valuable. You have evidence. Your own behavior has become the evidence. That creates a completely different kind of confidence, the kind that does not disappear when someone rejects you. And this brings us to another quality women often notice without consciously understanding why. A man who does not need to be constantly entertained. Most men are terrified of boredom. They need stimulation. They need messages. They need social media. They need attention. They need someone around them constantly. But a man who is comfortable with himself can sit alone without feeling incomplete. He can work alone. He can think alone. He can travel alone. He can spend an evening without needing someone to validate his existence. That does not make him antisocial. It makes him internally occupied. And there is a difference. When you can enjoy your own company, you stop treating relationships as emotional rescue. You choose people because they add something meaningful to your life, not because you cannot tolerate being alone. That distinction changes everything, because desperation often comes from believing that someone else possesses something you cannot create for yourself. Peace, confidence, excitement, purpose, identity. But when you learn to create those things internally, relationships become choices rather than necessities, and choice creates freedom. This is why solitude can become a man's greatest psychological advantage, not isolation, solitude. The ability to step away from noise long enough to hear your own thoughts, to understand what you actually want, to discover which goals are genuinely yours, to recognize which relationships strengthen you and which ones constantly drain you. Most men never spend enough time alone to discover themselves. They simply absorb whatever the environment tells them to become. They chase what everyone else chases. They want what everyone else wants. They imitate whatever gets attention, and then they wonder why they feel empty despite receiving approval. Because approval is not identity, attention is not purpose, and attraction is not self-worth. You can be desired by someone and still feel insecure. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. You can receive constant attention and still not know who you are. That is why external validation is such a dangerous foundation. It gives you a temporary feeling of value without building the internal structure that supports it. And the moment the validation disappears, everything collapses. A stronger man builds from the inside outward. He develops competence. He develops discipline. He develops emotional control. He develops purpose. He develops standards. And then relationships become an extension of his life rather than the foundation of it. This also changes how he handles attention. He does not become intoxicated by it. When a woman shows interest, he appreciates it, but he does not immediately build a fantasy around it. He does not turn one conversation into a future relationship. He does not mentally create an entire story before reality has provided the evidence. He stays present. He observes. He allows time to reveal character. This is important because attraction can make people see what they want to see. You meet someone attractive and your imagination starts filling in the blanks. You assume they are kind. You assume they are loyal. You assume they understand you. You assume the connection means something extraordinary, but you do not actually know yet. A man who can remain grounded while attracted is rare. He can enjoy chemistry without losing judgment. He can appreciate beauty without creating an illusion. He can desire someone while still asking whether their character aligns with his values. That is maturity. And maturity is attractive because it creates stability. You are not being pulled around by every emotional wave. You are capable of enjoying intensity without becoming controlled by it. And that is especially important because intense attraction can make people behave irrationally. They ignore red flags. They abandon routines. They neglect responsibilities. They stop seeing friends. They stop working toward goals. They become obsessed. And then they call it love. But sometimes it is simply emotional dependency wearing the appearance of passion. Real connection does not require you to disappear. It does not require you to abandon your identity. It does not require you to sacrifice everything that made you interesting in the first place. A healthy relationship should expand your life, not replace it. And when a man understands that, he becomes much more difficult to destabilize. He can love deeply while remaining grounded. He can commit without becoming dependent. He can give without constantly keeping score. He can receive without becoming entitled. And he can leave when the relationship consistently violates his values. That is emotional strength. But there is one final psychological principle that brings everything together. A man's attractiveness often increases when his actions demonstrate that he has nothing to prove. Think about the most confident people you have encountered. They usually are not trying to convince everyone they are confident. They simply move, they speak, they make decisions, they accept consequences. They do not constantly explain themselves. The insecure person often over-explains. He wants everyone to understand his intentions. He wants everyone to know he is a good person. He wants everyone to know why he behaved a certain way. He wants everyone to approve of his decisions. But a man who trusts himself does not need universal agreement. He understands that people are allowed to misunderstand him. They are allowed to disagree. They are allowed to leave. And he is still okay. That is freedom, because when you no longer need to control how people perceive you, you become much more authentic. You stop managing your image every second. You stop worrying about whether every word sounds impressive. You stop trying to appear mysterious. You simply become yourself. And ironically, that is when mystery appears naturally, because you are no longer giving people a carefully manufactured version of yourself. You are allowing them to discover you over time. That is far more compelling than performance. So, if there is one thing most men should understand about attraction, it is this: stop trying to become someone women cannot resist. Become someone who does not abandon himself just because a woman is attractive. That is the difference. One path leads to performance, the other leads to character. One makes you dependent on reactions, the other makes you independent of them. One teaches you how to get attention, the other teaches you how to become worthy of your own respect. And that second transformation changes everything. Because once you stop needing someone else's approval, you begin making decisions from a completely different place. You choose relationships based on compatibility. You choose friends based on character. You choose opportunities based on values. You choose goals based on purpose. You choose your life instead of waiting for other people to choose you. And that is where real power begins. Not when everyone wants you, when you no longer need everyone to want you, not when nobody can reject you, when rejection can no longer destroy you, not when you have complete control over other people's emotions, when you finally understand that you never needed that control in the first place. This is what most men ignore. The attraction they are searching for externally often begins with something internal: self respect, purpose, emotional stability, independence, and the courage to remain yourself when attention becomes available. Because the greatest test of confidence is not how you behave when someone wants you, it is how you behave when they stop wanting you. If you can remain grounded, you have developed something stronger than charm. If you can maintain your standards, you have developed something stronger than confidence. If you can walk away without bitterness, you have developed something stronger than control. You have developed freedom. And a man who is free does not need to manipulate attraction. He does not need to chase it. He does not need to force it. He simply lives. He builds. He grows. He chooses. And if someone wants to walk beside him, he welcomes them. But if they choose to leave, he does not abandon the path he was already walking, because he understands something most men spend years learning. The goal is not to become so attractive that nobody ever leaves. The goal is to become so grounded that when someone leaves, you do not leave yourself with them. That is the real difference. And once a man understands that attraction stops being something he desperately tries to obtain, it becomes a natural consequence of who he has become.